Welcome to the dashboard training for the ProCloud system. So what you're looking at currently is the dashboard that you will see whenever you first log on. Now, as you can see, there are current and over time. Now, the difference is that the current is only going to display roughly the last 5 minutes of data and is as current as you can get, obviously. The over time is going to be your historical record. By default, it will show the last 30 days, but you can decrease that interval in the top right-hand corner to 24 hours, 7 days, or the default of 30 days, or you can specify an entirely custom interval and get as precise as you want. So we'll go through each of these widgets here. So first of all, the current client count. Obviously, this will go up and down, but it just gives you a much tighter snapshot of the client count over time. Obviously, that is probably going to stay pretty flat because it is a short section of time, and then you'll see the variances in the overtime one. The current client status, you will most likely see most of your clients as active. If you see any of them as timeout, that is not necessarily a problem. It just means that the clients have not actually changed or passed any traffic in the last couple of minutes, and we have transitioned them to a timeout state. Depending on what your domain parameter is set to, we will time those out. We will actually drop those clients after a certain amount of time. By default, that is 10 minutes. So what that really means is I'm a client. I've logged into the wireless network either via pre-shared key or captive portal or whatever it happens to be, and I am now on the system and active. As soon as I stop passing traffic, then I switch to timeout after a certain period of time, and then after a configurable period of time in the timeout status, I will actually be dropped. Now, in most cases, it's not going to be that big of a deal either way, but for a captive portal user, they will require to be logged back in after that time. So the timeout value really only matters for captive portal clients in most cases. Now, the overtime ones, which is what we'll look at next, you can see the client count over time. And this one is very likely to go up and down, usually in nice spikes if you have a large domain, usually during the day, and then people go home and it goes down. So what you can see here is it shows the last 30 days. So let me change this to the last 24 hours. And once it reloads, you can see a much more defined trend line. So you can see much more granular data, in this case by the hour. So let me switch back to 30 days. Now this client count over time is total clients across all access points, such as the current client count is total clients across all access points. The next one is client usage. Now this is actually traffic passed, received, transmitted, and then both put together, again, across all access points. And you can see the totals at the very top of all clients for the last whatever time period it was and how much traffic has passed across the Wi-Fi network. Now you can see the per client usage over time. So we generate this by MAC address. And if we know a username, for instance, because of captive portal or 802.1x or whatever it happens to be, we will list the username to the left. So the usage will be broken down in percentage as well as by raw value. So what you'll see here is this particular MAC address has used 52 gigs over the last 30 days, and that accounts for 25% of the total usage on the system. And then, in this case, there aren't that many clients, so you actually see almost all the clients. But in most cases, you're going to have a lot of clients, so you'd only see the ones that are in your top 10. Okay. The current active access point count is just how many access points are currently up. And if you do have a lot of variance of access points bouncing or multiple sites with internet connection issues, you might see this go up and down. But most of the case, this should remain a flat trend line. Under the current AP status, you see a pie chart, and this is refreshed every few seconds. In most cases, you will see all of your APs in the up-to-date status. That means that they are currently up and running, they are configured properly, and they are checking in with the controller, and everything should be working correctly. Now, the other states you might see are unknown. Unknown means that an AP either has never connected to the system or has not connected to the system in a long time. If it is a recent disconnect, you will see it in state down. And if it's in the middle of changing configurations, you will see it in state updating. The other state you're likely to see is the modified state. And that is essentially the same as up to date, but it means that there is a pending configuration change that needs to be pushed. And that is pushed from the domain task. So if there was something that needed to be pushed, you would see a domain task with a little 1 here, and you would be able to click on that and run the domain task to push the change. Depending on what the change is, it could be anywhere from a few seconds outage to a couple of minutes, depending on what actually has to change on the configuration. Now you can see here in the current AP firmware versions that all of your APs should be on the same firmware version, with the exception of the ones that are unknown, which will obviously be in the unknown version because they have never connected. The only time that would change is if you had worked with tech support and we had modified the particular AP version on a particular access point, whether it be to fix an issue or for debugging or testing or whatever it might be, but that would have been done at the direction of tech support. Okay. So the following, at the bottom, you can see client count over time, which is this is how many clients have been connected to this particular access point, and it lists the top ones. And the same thing over to the left, but it prioritized differently. So in this case, we've only got 4 access points on this domain, so you're going to see all of them. But in most cases, you would see different APs show up in here, because one would be by client count, and one would be by client usage, which don't always line up one-to-one. And the next 2 below it are the same thing, except instead of being by access point, it's by SSID. So the way you would use these is you would be able to say, okay, this SSID is using the majority of my clients and or the majority of the actual throughput of this Wi-Fi system. And if that doesn't meet your expectations of what users should be doing, then we could take steps to address that as part of the ProCloud tech support service. On the top APs, what you're really worried about is the client count. Usage to a lesser extent, but the client count is the major one. If you've got a lot of clients on a few number of APs, then that is likely a result of you have coverage, but you don't have enough APs in a particular area to be able to support the density of clients. And more than likely, on those high number of clients per AP, the clients are not achieving the expected data throughput that the users would expect on a Wi-Fi network. The reason for that is there's only so many time slices in the RF spectrum, and the speed of which is really kind of a lowest common denominator scenario. So if you've got one guy that is operating at a really slow speed, he slows it down for everybody else too. Okay. If you go to the access points, so you can either get there from status access points or the APs link up here in the top. This will take you to all of the access points in your domain. You will be able to see the friendly name, the friendly sys location, the MAC address of the access point, the serial number of the access point, the private IP followed by the public IP, any locations that the access point has access to, what firmware it's running, what channel it's operating on, what transmit power it's operating on, how many clients it has, the current status of it, and then if there is any error or message available from you, and this is reported by the AP or determined by ProCloud. So in here, you would be able to click on the particular access point, and it will give you a list of clients per radio, and it will also tell you which SSIDs are advertised on which radio and which AP template is applied. If you go back and you click on the clients link, It will filter out the clients to just that access point in the search bar, so you can see who is there. So we'll take this opportunity to talk about the clients. So you can reach this from status clients, or going to the clients up here, or by clicking on the clients link on the access point status page, which is how we got here to begin with. Now, this is all triggered off of the MAC address. So the IP address is learned by spying on the DHCP messages going back and forth through the access point. So we know which MAC address is supposed to have which IP address. The name field will be populated, again, if there is a captive portal login or a 802.1x login. On a regular pre-shared key, we won't have a name. The other option for a name is if it's a MAC device, meaning that we have provided a specific role to a specific MAC address, and whenever that MAC address comes on to any SSID, then you will see that the name show up that's associated with the MAC device. In the status, you can see active or timeout. There are certain other statuses that are probably a little bit, you'll have to call tech support to find out what they are. The one you may see is location not reachable. That is usually an indication that there is VLAN issues or switch configuration issues on your LAN, or that the client is trying to use a static IP address. So in the auth type, you can see in this case it's pre-shared key, SSID authentication. You can also see what role they were assigned. In the case of SSID auth, the role is specified by the SSID. In the case of captive portal or 802.1x, the role is determined by whatever matching parameters are defined in the authentication. Then you can see which location the user is a part of, which is primarily determined by the role and then by which locations the particular access point has access to. And then in this case, we're limiting by this one access point, but you could see which AP name that the clients are connecting to, as well as the AP IP address and the SSID and what radio they're connecting on. Now, you want to get as many people on the 5 gigahertz spectrum as possible. And the reason for that is the 5 gigahertz is almost always the cleaner radio spectrum. There's a lot of things that occur in the 2.4 that will cause issues for Wi-Fi, such as Bluetooth, industrial equipment, medical equipment, microwaves, most scientific equipment that's recent operates in the 2.4. Some have started moving to the 5 gig as well. But the 5 gig offers more channels and more options to work around things like that. Finally, you can see the usage since the start time. So the start time is when this client initially logged on, and the usage is how much traffic they have passed both in and out total since that time. So going back to the access points, the one thing I need to show you is the locations. So essentially what this says here is that this access point has access to Kluver 172 and the 2 other additional VLANs. And for this one, for TNH, it's got access to the native VLAN, which is where the access point lives, and the additional VLAN. Now, the reason why this is important is if your role specifies, for instance, a non-default VLAN, and the access point that the user connects to does not have access to that VLAN, the client may not be able to associate to the network. If you're not seeing these show up the way you expect, then you would want to call tech support, and then they could work with you to figure out why they're not showing up properly. In most cases, it's going to be a switch configuration issue, but not always. Okay. The adjacent APs, this is essentially what the SSIDs that the access points have detected in their area. And in almost every case, it's going to be ones they've detected on their specific channel. So if you wanted to just search on every one of them, you'll have to contact support to get the APs put into sensor mode, and that way we could scan on every channel. The way you can do here is you can change by last seen, which will be the newest address, and these are all in UTC time unless you have changed your settings on your account. So you'll be able to see the sensor name, which is the AP that detected it, the signal strength, and what channel it's operating in for range as well as primary, as well as the SSID. The source MAC is the MAC address of the access point that is advertising this SSID on this channel, on this signal, so on and so forth. If you see any source MACs that start with 001992, those are other blue socket ProCloud access points, and you can pretty much ignore those. In those cases, that could lead to co-channel interference if it's between AP to AP, but that is something that the system has control over and you could work with tech support to resolve. The ones that are not the 001992 are the ones you got to concern yourself with, especially if they're over neg 80 signal. So in this case, we've got neg 81, neg 84, neg 84. Those are all pretty low. But we've got a neg 79, so that's right at the cutoff. Here's a neg 56. That could be a concern. The reason why the signal strength matters is most clients will disconnect from the Wi-Fi access point whenever they reach below neg 70. And you want to have at least 10 decibels of headroom to be able to get a good coherent signal at that low signal strength. And these signal strengths are determined by the signal at the access point. So as you move away from the access point, it's likely to get a little bit stronger, although which direction is unknown. That would require you getting on site with a scanner of your own and determining which direction the rogue APs are in. In most cases, when you're looking at these, the first thing you'll want to do is purge the adjacent APs, which will clear out all of the data in the table and let it build up for a few hours, and then come back and see what has been detected. A lot of what you're going to see in here is MiFis, the little cell phones or jetpacks from Verizon, whatever it would be, that like 4G hotspots essentially. And those you can't really do anything about, and you don't really need a channel plan for, because in most cases they're going to be transient. They'll come through, they'll cause problems, they'll go away, and you won't be able to adjust for them that quickly. Okay. Now the other things you will have access to as a ProCloud Plus customer is you will be able to change the SSIDs. What that means is you won't be able to create them, but you can modify them. So you can go into any individual SSID, change its pre-shared key, for instance, change the role it's attached to, change whether or not it is broadcasted, or change the name. So if you do need, for instance, an SSID that can be used sparingly or for special events, you would request that that be created for you with some name, special events, whatever it would be, and non-broadcasted. Then whenever you needed it, you would be able to go into it, change the name, set it to broadcast, update the key accordingly, and whenever you click the Update SSID, you'll get a domain task pop up, at which point you'll be able to push that change to your access points, which will require a reboot and is about a 2-minute downtime. The other thing you will have access to is under internal authentication, users, guest users, and Mac devices. So Mac devices, again, takes precedence over everything. So once you've authenticated to the system through whatever authentication method the SSID requires, and that is the authentication mechanism of either pre-shared key, open, or radius 1x. So in an open case, there really is no authentication. You connect to the captive portal, if it's an open captive portal, and you will get dropped directly into this role. You will not have to log in. And you do this by creating a Mac device, specifying a friendly name, specifying an address, and specifying a role. And whenever you create it, it will come in on this list, And now whenever you see this client connect under your active clients, this name will show up in that list that I referenced before. The users and the guest users really only matter for captive portal. And for hotels and things like that, this would be relevant to you. So you would put in a name, and this would be defined more by how your captive portal works. So you'll have to work with your project installation engineer to see exactly which procedure you should use for this. But for instance, this could be room 1, password, give it a role, and then you could say expire on specific date tomorrow, for instance, and create internal user. So that person would be able to log on, and because it is simultaneous user 0, or you could set that number specifically, they would be able to log on as many times as they wish with as many computers as they wish, or devices, and it would automatically shut them off at this particular date and time. Okay. Should you have any other questions, you should direct them to the project manager and or the project engineer for your system, or direct them to the ProCloud support after the installation is closed. Thanks.